Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Okay, so we've got, as I say, a good number joined now. We're a couple of minutes past 3 o'clock in the UK, so we'll get going. So yeah, as I say, massive thanks, guys, for joining. As far as today's webinar is concerned, this is the Surviving the Email Apocalypse, the Halloween Mail Manager webinar. We've got this to run for around 30 minutes. Yeah, I suppose that's depending on questions. As I said a moment ago, please feel free to fire questions in there and we'll try and get to as many as possible. So as far as what we'll be covering in today's webinar, in a moment, we've got an introduction to the speakers. So myself and my colleague Liam will be introducing ourselves and who we are and what we do at Mail Manager. We've then got 4 email horror stories to share with everyone. Some of those will, I'm sure, resonate with yourselves in how you manage your practices and some of the issues that are pretty ubiquitous across project-based companies when it comes to managing project email. We'll then cover off the dangers of the email apocalypse, covering off why email management matters. And then Liam will share 3 ways to arm yourselves for survival when it comes to email management, and then followed up by an introduction to our software, Mail Manager, and how that's helping companies across the AEC and project-based businesses manage email more efficiently. So an introduction to who we are. My name's Ben Thomas, so I'm one of the senior client managers at Mail Manager, and I'll just allow Liam to introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, I'm Liam Jones, and I'm also one of the senior client managers here at Mail Manager.
Excellent. Thanks, Liam. So initially, it's no surprise that with everything going on in the world right now, then teams either working remotely or in a hybrid working environment, that it's becoming more and more difficult to access project information when you need it. The days are gone, or limited at least, where you can turn around to the desk next to you and ask your colleague to help find an email. What this means for a lot of people is that they don't have access to the information they need and left out of the communication loop. And this is a huge problem. With over 319 billion emails sent and received every single day, email is still the most used communication and collaboration tool in many industries. And it's one of the most important things to manage projects efficiently, but also one of the things that people manage differently across every company, certainly in our experience. And this obviously creates a huge amount of risk for projects and project-based companies. And this is only going to increase. So how are you managing your emails in your organization? And as email management software solution at Mail Manager, we're no strangers to hearing email horror stories all the time. And we'll go through some of the most common ones we hear together now, so we can really see how quickly a lack of email management can get out of hand in the professional setting. But suppose you head out trick-or-treating or to a party this Halloween, you're likely to encounter people dressed up as Freddy Krueger, the Joker, or maybe even mythical killers like vampires and zombies. But I suppose you're less likely to encounter someone dressed as an email. So despite email communication method being one of the most notorious business killers, it's time to protect yourself against the email overload this Halloween. So as I say, we've got 4 email horror stories here that we encounter from companies we speak to, and I'm sure some of these will be relevant for you guys in your businesses as well. So George worked in an architectural firm with 60 employees, and he needed to find a particular important information, email that was evidence in a company that it adhered to a strict building regulations in regard to cladding. The problem was, though, a number of project members had left the business since George had joined, and George spent hours, even days, trying to find the information he was looking for, but was unable to track down that vital piece of information. Every time he went to click on that correspondence folder, he saw the dreaded empty. And his company couldn't prove that they had met the regulations, and was subsequently taken to court and fined over $120,000. I know people leaving companies has always been an issue when it comes to sharing information, but it certainly continues to be one of the leading causes in our experience of project disputes and past project information just not being accessible.
Certainly. And for horror story number 2, we've got Nightmare on Email Street. So Nancy's SME construction business was reliant on their email archiving solution. She just finished a long-term project, and as usual, had to bundle all the project emails into one file. Unfortunately, her IT company noticed the archive was unreliable and had actually corrupted. So they'd lost all their information, including scope changes, contracts, and approvals. Now, as the MD, losing data meant sleepless nights in case something went wrong with the project after it was completed, or perhaps the client asked for some information to be reproduced. And peace of mind for management counts for a lot. If you had a dispute on one of your projects, how confident would you actually be that you could find that information?
Absolutely. And our horror story 3, Silence of the Emails. So Kieran was responsible for a large project team and had a disagreement with a customer on a large project. And that really stemmed from a communication that happened before Kieran took over the project. Again, like I said a moment ago, something we're hearing a lot, certainly in the last year. He knew there was an email that would solve the disagreements, but both he and his team were unable to find it. And the disgruntled customer just wouldn't back down. And Kieran's business ended up paying over $60,000 in compensation. Even worse, his engineering firm's reputation was tarnished, and he embarrassingly had to explain the situation without the information to hand. Now, team members joining projects halfway through certainly is no new challenge for companies, but it can often lead to confusion, having to support claims and justifications without the correct information to hand.
And for horror story number 4, we've got what's keeping you up at night. So Stephen was asked by a client to see all the information relating to their project. He worked for a large engineering firm and often worked with a variety of parties along the supply chain. However, when this particular request came in, his team were all on holiday, so it was impossible for him to get a complete view of the correspondence that had taken place. Now, Stephen had to explain to the client he wasn't able to access the information they wanted as it was tucked away in individual inboxes, and he also spent over 2 weeks redoing work that had already been done. In fact, on more than one occasion, the same piece of work was done 3 times, wasting valuable time and effort. And this is something we hear a lot. Rework can be the most frustrating exercise any team member can undertake. And at the same time, despite the frustration, you're also burning valuable time spent on fee earning work.
So dangers of the email apocalypse, just like any other documents or record, emails need to be managed. Decisions, approvals, transactions, and other important business matters are so regularly included within email. Plus, more often than not, project email contains the context of a project. So the need for better email management is not up for debate. Failing to do this definitely increases the chances of risk and exposes your company to. So despite being the tool that most project and client-based firms use every day, email is seen as one of the top work stresses and productivity drains in the workplace. And actually, in a recent study that we conducted, Mail Manager found out that 1 in 3 employees spend nearly 1 full working day per week managing their inbox. And out of 1,000 UK and US decision makers we surveyed, 73% of them said that they spent too much time trying to find emails, and 70% believe that it was one of the biggest productivity drains in the workforce. So, clearly email matters. But when it comes to the business efficiencies and digital transformation, most businesses think of email as a bit of an afterthought. And obviously, this is a mistake, but it's never been more important for businesses to be able to find and file and search emails centrally. So they have one easily searchable audit trail of correspondence. It's time to leverage your email and work smarter and drive efficiencies and value.
Certainly. And we want to put together kind of 3 ways to arm yourself for survival, so to speak. This isn't necessarily for people that have email management in place, but more that they're kind of working day to day. So one way would be to increase accessibility. Most companies at the moment across a variety of industries, almost everyone works in teams. It's very rare to have someone just working individually, and therefore it just no longer makes sense to have only access to your own inbox. Having a central location where people can deposit and retrieve emails. Equally, another kind of tip would be to have internal conversations on how to effectively use email, whether that be from educating your employees or colleagues or on when or when not to send an email. And this is due to things like the fact that on average, only 38% of emails are actually relevant, and 62% of emails are not important and can just be processed in bulk. So as well, another tip would be to stop over checking and processing emails, setting specific time aside every day or even every week that's dedicated to just managing your inbox. We found it takes on average an employee 23 minutes to get their focus back after an email interrupts their workflow, which is a serious amount of time. And with the average worker receiving 88 emails per day, as well as sending 33, plus a recent study by Workfront found that the 53% of people cited excessive emails being the biggest challenge in getting work done. It's clear that it's an issue even before something's been filed.
So yeah, email is a vital way to work, as we've touched on a couple of times already so far. So don't just survive, thrive. And Mail Manager can take away the stress of everything email related. So email overload is a real phenomenon which prevents us from taking decisions or actions because we can't find and access the data we need. With more email users, accounts per user, and overall sends, email overload will only continue to grow in the coming years. And email plays an essential role in the successful running of projects in the industry. A typical construction project is made up of multiple moving parts across the supply chain and involves several companies. And projects are often run to tiny margins, so delays and other mistakes can be extremely detrimental to the project's success. And the last thing any worker on a project wants to do is waste time searching for emails, or to find out that they were working on outdated documents and data, and yeah, even have to do a rework, as Liam touched on earlier. And a powerful email management tool can make sure that it doesn't happen. So that's a bit of background and some email horror stories that we hear. I'm sure you guys on the call will relate to some of those stories, and even had some horror stories of your own to share. But as far as mail managers concerned, I'm just going to then now initially run through a bit of background to our company and who we are, and yeah, and then eventually go into a bit of a demonstration on how we can help. Before running through a bit of a story, I'd like to just reinforce that we've got a Q&A feature. So as we go through this and as I jump into the demo, if you've got any questions on anything myself and Liam have shared and talked through thus far, please feel free to send those in, and we'll be monitoring those. And as I say earlier, be attempting to answer as many as possible before our time's up on today's session. So who are we, and why was Mailmanager developed in the first place? So some of you on the call, I'm sure, will be familiar or more than familiar with Arup Engineering. So Mailmanager was developed by Arup, who are a multidisciplinary engineering firm. We're headquartered in England, but the system was developed because Arup faced a number of different challenges, not least the consistency at which people were managing email. We had a system in place, public folders, that we were supposed to be dragging and dropping to. The theory was great, but the practice was not. And also, as we touched on as well, that up-to-date information just wasn't accessible. In the fast-moving projects industries that we worked in, people just didn't have the up-to-date information accessible at the right times. And rework, something we touched on already, as well as the embarrassing tarnished reputation on some jobs and some companies encounter. So why was the system developed? We actually set out as a firm and as a practice to look at systems that were available, solutions to the email management horror stories that we were facing day to day. Nothing really we saw ticked all the boxes that we wanted to. I think everything that was available at the time was a bit too holistic, kind of meant drastically changing huge other areas of the company. And we knew that people wanted to work in the same way, but perhaps speed things up and make it easier, and make filing and capturing and searching information much easier than not. So what we did was develop the system purely for our own teams, never with the intention to be sold or marketed, but companies we spoke to, worked with very closely on some projects internationally, we found shared some of the concerns that we had when we first developed Mailmanager. So that's really where we saw the potential in the system. So having developed it internally and using it on a number of projects internationally, about 3 or 4 years ago, we made the system available to other companies publicly. In that time, the system's been introduced and used across the world, predominantly in the AEC industries, but that's is been broadening out because the email horror stories, the email problem is ubiquitous to pretty much any company that has Outlook accounts.
Brilliant. So I just wanted to run through, I suppose, some of the common problems that we hear from our clients, and as well as our prospective clients. And I think one of the biggest as well is that risk of losing sensitive information. We don't know if an email has been filed, or perhaps it's not been filed at all, which could be sensitive to the project and detrimental if perhaps, as we mentioned earlier, maybe you have to go back for litigation or such. But as well, with the day-to-day, you've got that wasted time spent searching and filing emails manually. It can take minutes and hours of your day just dragging and dropping into a folder, and equally having to go into those folders to retrieve that information. But as well, we've got that lack of control. Now, of course, we're kind of more of a work from home environment. It's almost impossible to be looking over our employees' or colleagues' shoulders and making sure they're filing in a manner we want. So it's more important than ever to make sure that we have a system in place that means that we know emails are going where they need to go. And finally, we've got that information locked in people's inboxes, which is something we've touched upon quite a lot this afternoon, which is extremely true. People leaving a company or even going on holiday and having vital information stuck in their inbox that mean we can't get it, and can lead to multiple complications.
Yeah, thank you, Liam. So we've touched on a lot of the issues around email and some of the potential risks associated with the mismanagement of it, but fear not, there is a solution. So what I'm going to do now is run through a bit of an introduction to Mailmanager and a brief demonstration on exactly how it works and how it can work for your company. So initially, what is Mailmanager? So Mail Manager is an Outlook plugin. So quite simply, it will sit in the ribbon of all of your inboxes. It's these three buttons at the top here with these additional drop downs. So what I'll be able to do in a moment is run through the filing aspects of the system. So how do we make filing as easy as possible for the project teams, and take that reliance away for them to have to think about it the entire time, both sent and received emails. And then I'll go into the search portion and really expand on how you can access that information in a timely fashion in one central place. So irrespective of whether you were involved in the project or not, or even if you're at the company at the time that the project was started and completed, you'll be able to find that email quick and easily through the Mail Manager search. So initially on where the emails get filed to, guys. So through the tools and search locations, Mail Manager can facilitate a hybrid of systems. So I'm sure there's a smattering of different setups for the companies and people that have joined today's webinar, but there are some common data environments that Mail Manager can link into. So whether your projects are captured onto your internal server, you can file them directly into a project folder just by having an email subfolder within that, so all the emails get captured. You can also integrate into things like SharePoint, so that if you want something that's on a cloud system, so you can access that from anywhere internationally, even if you're not in the office, you have that ability as well. So what does that look like on the back end and on your servers? This is a project that myself and Liam actually work on together, and an emails folder in there. That's where all the emails will get captured to, and that's where all of the emails can be deduplicated as well. So when an email is filed, it's given this date and timestamp, which is automatic. This area, though, you would never go to file or find emails. You'd always be doing that through Mail Manager's search facility and through the filing of the system as well. So going back into the inbox then, how do you file emails? So there are a couple of ways that people can file emails, and this is demonstrated here. So on the left-hand side of my inbox, I can see a list of folders here with an asterisk next to each one. That's a really quick way of dragging and dropping emails. So if you got an email here and move it to one of these folders, you can keep it within your inbox, as well as that being linked directly to the project folder on your server or on SharePoint, wherever that's being held, so the rest of the team can see that straight away. You can also, as well, if you want to, right-click on an email to capture that conversation, and Mail Manager will suggest a list of most likely project folders that our email should get captured to. But with these two processes, whilst they're quick and easy, you're still relying on people to be thinking about filing. And as myself and Liam touched on earlier, a lot of times companies don't have the time or the inclination to be thinking about filing the whole time. So what we came up with to ensure that that habit is reinforced, and to make sure that that becomes easier than not, when you close an email down, something you don't need to respond to, you get Mail Manager's prompts. So the prompt will predict, as I say, the folder based on keywords and historical information as where you filed that email from that person previously. So all that you have to do is click the file button, and the email will be filed directly into the project folder there. So I've just seen a couple of questions come through. So thanks, guys. Please feel free to keep them coming. Then Liam, if you wanted to take one of those questions there.
Yeah, of course. So we've got one here that says, how does it deal with duplication? Which is a great question. So Mail Manager is given a unique timestamp right down to the second every time an email comes in. So if you did have 3 people working on the same project and they're getting CC'd in those same emails, when they file it into the same location, Mail Manager is actually going to recognize that 2 of those 3 are duplicates. It will automatically delete those 2 and just keep the 1.
Excellent, absolutely. We've also got another question that's come through there as well on what if emails shouldn't be seen for everyone? So thank you for that question. That is something that comes up a lot. There's a couple of ways that companies deal with that. I'm assuming that question was asked in direct relation to perhaps the more sensitive emails, something to do with finance, something that shouldn't be accessed by the entire project team. So Mail Manager works very simply on mirroring the permissions you have set up on your existing project folder structure. So for the odd folder within the server that only principals and directors can see, because that's got a security permission on it when you set it up and you link it to Mail Manager, that will mirror that. So those that can't see it on the server or on SharePoint won't be able to file to it or won't be able to see it on Mail Manager. So you've got that security there. The next part of the demonstration itself was on replying to emails. Now, not everyone goes in with a certainly with a sort of drag and drop system. It was one of the biggest challenges that we found with the way that we worked at Arup before looking at Mail Manager, or before looking at developing Mail Manager. So the sent items were always getting forgotten about. So what we came up with was the ability to file emails just by replying to them. So if I pen a response here to Alex and click send, I'm again met with that prompt. It's predicting the exact project folder the email should get filed to. But the key difference here is the send and file, and this is the 2-in-1. So when I send the email to that person, it will file both the thing I've received and the email I've sent in one go. So you've got both sides of every conversation getting captured. So if someone leaves the company or is away on holiday or vacation for a couple of weeks, you have the up-to-date information and a full audit trail there being captured.
Great, but I think we have one question that's relevant to the filing, if that's all right. Anonymous attendees just asked, how does Mail Manager know where to file emails?
Yeah, great. I just saw that. Thank you, Liam. So, so the prediction is designed to be as accurate as possible and is based on two key elements. So one is the AI. So it'll be looking at keywords, key phrases from the conversation, not just the subject line, because again, our teams at Arup were pretty inconsistent with putting in the correct project numbers. Certainly external clients, we found that to be the case. So it'll be picking up conversations there, keywords, as I say, key phrases, project codes. But the second element is the machine learned one. So if I'm sending emails to someone and over a period of time we build a relationship, it will remember where I've filed emails from and to that person, that email account, which project folder am I filing them into. So it starts to remember there as well to make the solution as accurate as possible, to really remove that reliance away from people to have to think about filing as well. I've also seen a question come through on mobile phone usage. Liam, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, of course. So when it comes to mobile phone usage, we have actually recently released a mobile app, Mail Manager app, that if you're using OneDrive, Teams, or SharePoint, you are able to file and search using that app. However, of course, we appreciate not everyone is using cloud, and people using a server. What we have is essentially folders that would be within your app on your phone, and you have the ability to drag and drop the emails into those folders, and they will stay in a state of pending until you reopen your desktop or PC and log back into that VPN, and then they'll automatically file into that location.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've seen one here come through from Anthony, who's asking about server space, about auto filing. So that's a really important question. So thank you for sending that through, and something, again, that myself and Liam, I know for a fact, get asked a lot. So as far as the server space is concerned, you can, and Mail Manager prompting the behavior so that you file emails with consistency. Perhaps not every email needs to get captured. With the deduplication elements of Mail Manager, and we've had a number of our clients that have been with us for a number of years do a couple of case studies for us, that over a third of all the emails that people file are also duplicates. And I'm sure everyone on this call is no stranger to being CC'd into one of those huge blanket emails that everyone adores so much. So when you go to file that from six people filing that from one person, the deduplication saves a massive amount of server space as well. And the same is true for SharePoint. So when you're filing things into SharePoint as well, for those of you that are using that as your common data environment, the emails will also be deduplicated in turn. Excellent. So then, as far as the filing is concerned, these are probably the key elements of the system. There is the ability to retrospectively file emails as well, which I can touch on in a bit more detail. I think every company we bring on board without fail has some emails that they want to be able to move into Mail Manager, whether it's 10 days worth or 10 years. And that's also something we can help facilitate. But the key element to think of the system is the searchability. And this is really the biggest improvement as far as the collaboration across entire companies and entire project teams. So going into the Mail Manager search, it is accessed through the button at the top here. So clicking on this magnifying glass opens this window. So this is now the one central place that everyone goes to access those information, or that information rather. Now, this also speaks to the permissions. So you can have different people will have different access through this one central window. but there's a whole host of refinements I can put on here to really narrow down exactly what it is I'm looking for. Now, this enter search terms box is probably the one that I use more than most, and it's certainly the case for the clients that we speak to. And this is your Google bar. How do I search for keywords, key phrases across entire networks? So I put in a keyword there, perhaps a material that a project team might be working on, or working with rather. That will search across the entirety of that network and across those different folders. And in this example, bring me down to 17 items there in under a second. I can then refine that filter further and say, okay, of these emails which contain attachments, by selecting yes there, and quite simply, you can preview the email here on the right-hand side, or by double-clicking on that conversation, that will find it in the project folder, pull it out, so you've got it in its original format to do whatever you need to with it, and have that instant access there. I've just seen a question come through, I think ties in and might have been off the back of my comment on retrospective filing from an anonymous attendee. So if you've got emails already archived on your server, as long as they are in an EML or MSG format, which I'm sure they are, Mail Manager, just by linking the folder to Mail Manager, they'll automatically index all those historical emails. So rather than invest in Mail Manager, see the benefit in 6 months' time, you can have the emails accessible by everyone from day one, going back to, as long as you've been archiving emails, 10 years in some cases. So that's a couple of examples of the search itself. What I was going to do is search in something a bit broader, like invoice, for those of you that are searching contractual and financial information. This entry location dropdown then is the ability for your teams to jump into those projects. Now, everyone will have over time a couple of those bold projects. Those are the ones they work on more than most, their favorites, if you like, but you can as well search across the entire project network. And this is whether this was in the server and SharePoint or other systems that you might be hosting the data all in one. So everything here filed to this project Gensler, who are a client of ours, to do with invoice, sent in the last year, and was sent by someone called George. And just by playing around with those filters, you can see the conversations whittled down to 3 there as a really quick and easy way of searching exactly what you need to. Excellent. But as far as the demonstration itself is concerned, that's a very, I suppose, a quick overview of how the solution works and how it can work for your company as well. Please feel free to be sending through more questions. We've got a couple of minutes here, and we'll endeavour to cover off those in the final few minutes as well. So actually, we've got one through about spam and junk for Mail Manager. So there's no necessarily easy way of managing it through the system itself. As I say, you've got the ability to file emails, the ones that are project critical, but as we kind of touched on earlier, nothing, not every email needs to get captured. So for the odd email that is spam or isn't project critical, you can just remove that from your inbox without filing it to the project folder. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. Excellent.
I can see another one here, Ben, as well, where someone's asked, what if I'm working on a different project management platform like Procore? Can emails be saved there too? And yes, they can. When it comes to Procore, we do actually integrate with Procore, as well as a few other systems similar. Viewpoint for Projects is an example for one. And it's very similar to the way Ben showed you in that back end earlier. It's essentially supporting the filing and searching of emails into Procore or any of those systems similar. So we do have the ability to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well, I think that's all the questions we got through. If there are any we've missed, then we will endeavour to reach out to you after this, as I mentioned. But the reverse is true. So I really appreciate everyone's time for jumping on. I hope it was interesting and useful for everyone to learn a bit more about some of the email horror stories in the lead up to Halloween, and also a bit about how we can help rectify those issues. So if anyone has any questions for us, then please feel free to reach out to our sales inbox at sales@mailmanager.com, and we'll be more than happy to get back in touch with you, rather via email or organising a call or even a tailored demonstration for you and how your company operates. But yeah, massively appreciate everyone's time, and thank you, Liam, for your time as well.
Thanks for having me.